Is Chris Martin a tradable piece for the Boston Red Sox? Find out on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hobot, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston and Balling podcast, and I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed for free. And honestly, who doesn't love free? So you might as well check it out, right? Locked On is here for you, your team, every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome to the show. A little bit later in today's show, I'm going to be hopping on with Sully from Locked On MLB. We're going to be discussing a lot of things about the Red Sox, the offseason so far, whether the Red Sox should trade Kenley Jansen, who else could go in that package. So that'll all be later on in the show. But first, a name that's been brought up recently that potentially could be a trade option for Boston is Chris Martin. He is coming off a season that was fantastic. He was one of the best relievers in baseball in 2023, which I did not expect at all. When the Red Sox signed him, I was excited about it. I said, oh, good, this is a guy that could come in and contribute out of the Red Sox bullpen. But I did not expect him to have the season that he had. And I don't believe he'll be able to repeat that season. I think it was just too good of a season for him to have again. So I feel like his 2024 season will be a little bit worse than it was in 2023. Definitely not a bad season by any means, but we could see some regression from him. Now, the bullpen is not the weakness for Boston right now. If the Red Sox want a young, controllable starting pitcher to go into their rotation that they can develop and help with the rebuild that this team's trying to go through, maybe you look into moving Chris Martin. And Kenley Jansen is another one that I'm going to be talking about later on the show. But if you think about Chris Martin, his value is at its highest now. So if the Red Sox do want to move him, now would be the time to consider doing that. It's just a matter of, do the Red Sox want to take the risk of letting go of a guy who really was the mold of that bullpen last year and was one of the biggest reasons for the team's success overall in 2023 out of the pen? They had some struggles, and that was more on the starting pitching side of things. The bullpen itself, not as much of a concern for Boston. So do the Red Sox want to give up a guy who was at the heart of that? Because if they're trading him, of course they're risking, the bullpen seeing a little bit more of a struggle in 2024. But would they rather take that sacrifice for a young, controllable starting pitcher who has a lot of talent and a lot of potential that they could slot into their rotation and be part of this future that the team is trying to build? That's a question that needs to be asked. And it'll be interesting to kind of see if the Red Sox have that thought process, because they have some assets that they could trade, but only if the scenario makes sense. And Chris Martin's the type of guy to me that if you keep him, yes, you're hoping he has a very productive season like he did, but if you let him go, you're opening up the door for another huge need, which is in that starting rotation. So it really could go either way, but it's really up to the Red Sox to decide whether they feel like the move is worth it or not. And coming up, I'm going to be joining Sully from Locked On MLB, where we will be discussing Chris Martin and a whole lot of other things. If you're ever in a pinch and looking for last-minute tickets for anything, Gametime absolutely has you covered. I actually used it the other day. My friends and I were getting concert tickets to see Dan and Shay at TD Garden. I love Dan and Shay. They're one of my favorite country bands. So I went on Gametime and they had really good ticket prices there relative to looking at other sites that I was looking at. And I said, yeah, I definitely need to use Gametime for these because it's going to be a lot cheaper. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Right now, all Gametime users get $100 off a big game ticket with code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the Gametime app and use code Vegas100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. It really is fantastic. It will get you a lot of good deals on tickets. So head to Gametime today. Also, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. So if you are ever trying to get caught up in all things sports, you can head to Locked On Sports today, and all of the Locked On hosts will give you the most recent updates on everything going on so that you can catch up a lot quicker no matter what time zone you're in. It's always live. So head to YouTube today and subscribe to Locked On Sports today.
Hey, everybody, look who decided to stop by the podcast. I promised you we were going to be talking about the Red Sox, and Gabby Hobot from Locked On Red Sox have stopped by. How you doing, Gabby?
I'm doing great, Sully. How are you doing?
I'm just looking forward to pitchers and catchers reporting. And by the way, Gabby is our wonderful new host, relatively new. Gabrielle Starr was there for so long, and for a while I felt that we could only have people named Gabby or Gabrielle there. Lauren was there in between too, but Gabby's just killing it with Locked On Red Sox, and also just see her on the interweb. She's talking about all Boston sports all the time. You're my eyes and ears in my old hometown. And
happy to represent.
Absolutely. As I'm here in Pasadena, California, overlooking the historic Rose Bowl. I'm closer to Mookie Betts, of course, as Mookie Betts is pulled into the orbit here. But this has been a strange off season for the Red Sox, and it was an interesting year for the Red Sox last year. The final year of the Bloom administration, but they were sub 500, but there were cracks of hope on the team, especially the emergence of Casas, the emergence of Duran, the emergence of Bello, the fine season by Yoshida, and I actually like the Chris Sale trade because I don't think how many more years you're going to get out of Sale, and Vaughn Grisham is a good second base prospect. And they kept Devers. But I want your take because they traded Sale, they traded Verdugo. What are your thoughts? Because I know some Red Sox fans are not happy with what's happening there.
Yeah, I think the primary reason for the unhappiness is the lack of transparency from the Red Sox in terms of what their actual goals are for this upcoming season, because it's really coming across like they're trying to build around a young core that they eventually have coming up from the minors. Players like Marcelo Meyer, Kyle Teal, Roman Anthony, that core that eventually will all come up and help shape what the future of the Boston Red Sox is going to look like, along with, you mentioned Casas and Duran. Those guys will be part of that core too. And obviously Devers, because he's here to stay now. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be the direction that they're heading in. Although prior to the offseason starting, they were talking about how they're going to go full throttle this offseason. And clearly their definition of full throttle is different from the fans' definition of full throttle, because full throttle to me is more like what the Dodgers have been doing this offseason, because they've really been going in this offseason. And that's going to be, a very, very stacked roster for them heading into 2024. So props to them. But the Red Sox are in an interesting place right now because they're in a very tough division, and they're in a place right now where they can't really afford to give up a lot of young assets for pitching. Now, there are guys out there that they could have had a conversation about that are ace caliber starters that they could try to execute a trade for. But I would hate to see them have to dig into that core group of Kyle Teal, Marcelo Meyer in order to get a pitcher like that when those guys are definitely worth keeping around because they're going to be the future of the organization. But what I would have liked to see more of is have them be a little bit more aggressive in terms of the free agent contracts that they could have given out. I also agree with the Chris Sale trade. Unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to stay healthy the last few years. And who knows how much he was really going to pitch this upcoming season for the team. So I think it was a move that needed to happen. They got a great return in the deal and a guy who could be a solid second baseman moving forward because second base was an issue for the Red Sox last year. They
Certainly
didn't really
was,
have, a full-time second baseman. So having him in here now with Grisham, I think he's a great addition to this roster. He's very talented and he's somebody that the Red Sox helped fill a need with. So I did agree with that. Verdugo was another one. They had to get rid of an outfielder somehow because they just had an overload of outfielders here. And, Alex Cora and Alex Verdugo were not always on the same page last year. So I had a feeling he was going to be moved. But my biggest thing right now with this team is there are still a lot of question marks, especially with the starting rotation. I think, when you look at some of these guys like Brian Bayo or Cutter Crawford, those are guys who definitely have a lot of potential, and we've seen that potential. And I think having Andrew Bailey here to work with them can help elevate their game. But then, they bring in a guy in Lucas Giolito who is a question mark. I mean, he hasn't pitched well.
Oh yeah. That's like the Riddler. So many question marks because you saw he pitched pretty well, and then when he pitched for the Angels for an hour and a half, he was horrific. I mean, there was no middle ground with that guy.
No, and that's a concern of mine. Is we saw what he was, prior to all these off-field issues that he had going on, and he used to be dominant. Yeah. And I think the Red Sox are hoping they can get some semblance of that back, but that's a very questionable thing, like whether he can get back to that or not is a major concern for me. And then, they have Nick Pivetta who's going to pitch out of the starting rotation, but I really liked his numbers last year a lot better out of the pen. So who knows if he'll be able to translate that. And then the fifth spot is kind of up for grabs right now. So I don't doubt that they can help elevate some of these guys that they have, but it would feel nice to be reassured of having that true number one proven guy at the top of the rotation because that's something that they have not had in a long time.
Well, that was why the only free agent that was floating out there that I really want to see the Red Sox go after was Yamamoto. Because I thought if you put Yamamoto, for my Australian fans, that's my first look at of the night. So there you go. Take a drink. I said look at. If you put Yamamoto, if he is just 3/4 of what he was in Japan, if he is like the equivalent of a Tanaka when he came over and pitched very well for New York, if you have him, that takes pressure off of Bello, that takes pressure off of Crawford, and maybe you'll get good Tanner Houck. At this point, the Red Sox would be fine with mediocre Tanner Houck as opposed to the batting practice that happened last year. Remember, mediocre is better than bad. So you would have, if you had Yamamoto, Crawford, Bello, Houck, that's a wild card contender, I think. Or at least, that gets you above 500. But when they didn't sign him, I was like, okay, take a shot with what's his name? Giolito. Roll the dice. Who knows? But that's when I felt like, okay, it's time to move forward. I mean, you mentioned the transparency. Okay, my Red Sox fandom. I mean, I have the '82 Red Sox yearbook behind me. I've earned my credentials. I would have no problem if they said, look, but wait, no, that was in character. That wasn't me saying it. That was the management. If they said, we are going to put together the next good young Red Sox team that you're going to fall in love with. I believe that Red Sox fans would say, okay, you're going in a direction. What I don't think Red Sox fans like is kind of, as like you said, we're going to go gung-ho. Okay, gung-ho is Lucas Giolito. That's just, we see what you're doing. Just tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at too, is people would have been much more understanding, I think, if they just were honest about that and said, we have a lot of young talent in this system that we believe in and we trust to be the future of the Boston Red Sox. So right now, we are not at a point where we want to go all in on getting these high-end guys that are going to cost that future for us. And I think people would have understood more the vision of where they're going instead of saying what they tried to say and people under the impression that they're in win now mode, because they are not and they don't need to be, because I think what they are building can be something special. It's just going to take time. And I just wish that Red Sox ownership and people involved in those types of decisions just came out and said that originally, so they weren't setting unrealistic expectations for all of us.
Well, it's a surefire bet that Red Sox fans are not happy with what the management is doing. And I am not going to put any money on the Red Sox winning the division. But if I'm going to be making any bets, I'm heading over to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use that you'll come up with new ways to use the word parlay that you never thought of before. Say you can get the live same game parlays. You can make a parlay at the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an easy chip shot. FanDuel is an official partner of the National Football League. Locked On has created the first 24/7 national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. We're with Gabby Hobot of Locked On Red Sox. Hey, quick question for you. I said it right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Here's another name I may stub my toe on. Ceddanne Rafaela, who is one of the top Red Sox prospects right now. Where does he fit in with the team? I mean, he had a cup of coffee with the Major League roster last year. Where are they seeing him fitting in with the club?
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting talent because he can play both in the outfield and the infield. So he has that versatility that he can offer to the Red Sox roster. However, the question now becomes, is that talent and that versatility worth hanging on to? Because he's the type of player they could move and package into a trade for somebody if they really wanted to, because again, they still are stacked in the outfield right now with talent. And then now they brought in Grissom for second base. And obviously Trevor Story is going to be the primary shortstop until Marcelo Meyer.
Up. He's a seat filler. He's a seat filler for Meyer, basically.
I mean, it's true, but it is true. But his defense is very good. So I do give Story credit for that, because he completely helped turn around that defense. That was a mess last year when he came back up. So can't really hate on the guy for that when he came back from injury. So
Fair enough.
I think, I'm totally fine with him being just a kind of a placeholder there until Meyer comes up. And then, it seems like the Red Sox are really trying to just keep that young core in place. So then the outfield, is probably going to look something like, Duran, Abreu, maybe Yoshida and Tyler O'Neill as kind of, the primary outfielders. The question becomes, though, do they see Rafaela as somebody who can fit into that equation? And at some point they have to decide, do we move Yoshida to a DH role more because his defense is weak in the outfield? So I could see them hanging on to Rafaela for now because of that versatility and feeling like they can slot him in somewhere in either the outfield or the infield if need be. But long term, I don't see him being part of the puzzle, especially because they have another young outfielder in Roman Anthony, who's
Right.
likely going to be coming up soon and is going to be part of that equation too. So Rafaela is somebody that I see the Red Sox actually eventually moving for a piece that they need, because he has a lot of value with that versatility. And in his short little stint last year, in the time he came up, he put up some very strong numbers at the plate too. So he's definitely somebody that I think would draw interest from a lot of teams. And ultimately, long term, I don't see fitting in with what the Red Sox are trying to do here, simply because of the other talent that they have coming in. But for right now, I could see them kind of hanging on to him for a little bit longer until they fully work out this whole situation with the outfield, because there's still some question marks as to really what that outfield's going to look like and how they're going to go about that.
I have a friend of mine who's a diehard Red Sox fan who called him Kike Jr. because, like, Kike Hernandez could play the outfield, could play the infield. Oh, Kike Jr.'s in there. Kike Jr.'s in there. And
The dad version of Kike, or what are we?
Well, yeah, I think he was hoping to be the playoff version of Kike in the the Rays series. God, 2021 seems like a long time ago. They were 2 wins away from the World Series. That's a long time ago.
That season was just it's just looking like more and more of an outlier now.
But you know what? There have been outliers. I mean, let's be honest. 2013 was an outlier. That was a rebuilding team that just happened to win the World Series.
I'm hoping we get 2013 vibes this year.
No, but I was I was absolutely positive the 2013 Red Sox were going to be absolutely terrible. Go back and listen to my podcast from then, and I was giving them no credit. But it's interesting. You brought up Rafael as being part of a trade. I think the Red Sox should maybe package him with Kenley Jansen and Chris Martin, because and try to get a couple more good young, maybe arms in there or someone, because having Jansen and Martin on the team, it's the proverbial you're rebuilding your house, but you bought a really nice toaster to put in while the house is being demoed. Like, they have a closer in Jansen who I have mixed feelings about as someone who's seen a lot of his games in LA, but he is, he was an all-star last year. And there's a lot of teams that are saying, oh, we need bullpen depth. Chris Martin had a wonderful year for the Red Sox last year. If you could throw Rafaela, who doesn't really have a spot on the team, Jansen and Martin as a package, and say, hey, look you get 2 quality arms for your bullpen and a young player. Throw us a couple of young players back. That's exactly what I'd be doing, especially as teams are trying to, there's a bunch of teams who have gaping holes in their bullpen right now, including the defending World Series champion Texas Rangers, that you could, and they have a bunch of young players and not a lot of spots for all of them. I don't know. I would be making those calls, because by the time the Red Sox are a championship caliber team again, Jansen won't have any trade value. So let's go on this.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Chris Martin, if they want to move him, now is the time to do it, because what if he regresses this upcoming season? I mean, there's no guarantee he's going to have the same type of season he had last year, because I did not expect the season he had last year. I mean, I was excited when they signed him in terms of, I think there's, some upside with him. He could be a good piece out of the pen, but for him to be one of the best relievers in baseball last year was definitely not anything that I expected. And he was lights out most of his outings. And so if the Red Sox do want to trade him, now would definitely be the time to do that, when his value is at an all-time high, because it's going to be tough if they head into the season with Martin in that pen and he starts to backtrack. from what he was last year. And then the Red Sox are kind of in a spot where they kind of wasted an opportunity. And the same goes for Kenley. I mean, Kenley didn't have the best, most miraculous season in Boston last year, nor did I think that he would at this point in his career with where he's at. The saving grace with Jansen was that he, is a proven legitimate closer.
Yeah.
And there was a period of time where the Red Sox didn't have a closer and they were just throwing people into that role and hoping it worked. Like that 2022 season, they blew a lot of late games because they didn't have an established closer in there. So they would have to probably go back to that mentality a little bit if they were to move Jansen. But it would have to be a situation where they say, okay, do we see somebody like Garrett Whitlock moving into the closer role or Tanner Houck? Because Tanner Houck is fantastic, but he struggles the third time through the order still. So he's a type of pitcher to me that I've always seen as a 2, maybe 3 inning bullpen type of guy. I've been saying for a while, I like his stuff better out of the pen because he's absolutely lethal if he only has to face a lineup once or twice. So this could be a good opportunity for the Red Sox to say, we've tried him as a starter, and although he's good for the first couple times through the order, what do we do about that third time? Maybe we eliminate that and we put him in the closing spot and kind of see how that works. And that could actually be a situation that works for them. And Kenley Jansen, he's going to draw interest regardless because he's Kenley Jansen and because of the career that he's had. Yeah. So they would definitely be able to find a trade partner for him. And, Rafaela would be an added bonus on that too, because he's a young player with a ton of upside and a lot of talent. So I'm sure there would be teams willing to give up a young, controllable pitcher because the Red Sox are looking for somebody who can be under team control for a while. So if they can get somebody like that in a return, that's the type of piece that they can use to continue this rebuild long term. If they can get a young starting pitcher that they can help, be part of that whole operation and they can really work with him and fine tune his skills, that could be a well-spent move for the Red Sox. And I don't know how serious these trading Kenley Jansen rumors really are because
they should
be. This offseason's really been all over the place in terms of the reports and what's legitimate and what's not. I wouldn't be surprised if they're shopping him. If they do shop him, I would not be overly upset about it. I would be curious to see what their backup plan is for who they plan to have close out games, because there were definitely games last year where I was grateful it was Kenley there in that spot. So I'd be interested to see who they plan to bring into that role if they do trade him. But I absolutely do think it's a trade they could make to a team that needs more bullpen depth, because ultimately right now the bullpen is not the weakness for the Red Sox. Like they had a good bullpen last year and they will have a good bullpen still. So if they do move those guys that you mentioned, they're not really taking a step back completely in terms of the strength of the bullpen next year.
Well, look, and in terms of the state of the AL East, I mean, I think the Yankees were not as bad as they were when they were 82 wins. I don't think they were as good as they were when they won 99 wins. I think I think they're a high 80, low 90 win team. I think the Orioles and the Rays are better and Toronto's better. So at this point, you might as well just take advantage of this time to say, all right, well, let's back up and see. And if by 2025 they're a legitimate pennant contender, I think all will be well in the world. Well, look at Gabby. This was fantastic having you on, and tell people where they can listen to your fabulous show.
Yeah, you can follow Locked On Red Sox on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes every day talking all things Red Sox. It's a great time, I promise you. You can also follow the show on Twitter at @LO_Red Sox. You can interact with other Red Sox fans that way. I like to post a lot of things, especially during the season, and you'll see a lot of other fans who are just as angry as you are about the outcomes of some of these games. So check out the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow it on Twitter. You can also follow me on Twitter at Gabby Hobot 10. And interact with me that way during the off season, during the season, whenever you want. I'm always up to talking Red Sox with anybody. So check me out there too.
Now let's just check out a trivia question. Yesterday was a great day for former Red Sox for about a minute. Adrian Beltre, third base, got elected to the Hall of Fame. Another Red Sox third baseman who had a great highlight was Brock Holt, who was the first person that hit for the cycle in a postseason game.
That was crazy.
But Brock, the trivia question is, what connection does Brock Holt have with Wade Boggs' legacy with the Red Sox? That is your trivia question. What direct link does Brock Holt have with Wade Boggs' legacy on the Red Sox? So send that to Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Taking a look at the Red Sox and what a confusing team they are with Gabby Hobot of Locked On Red Sox. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan of Locked On MLB. Please call me Sully.